ho, ho! Nothing gets me in the Christmas spirit quite like watching It's a Wonderful Life. It truly is a wonderful life, and this is a wonderful voice, the voice of Jimmy Stewart. Known for such famous films as It's a Wonderful Life, Rear Window, The Philadelphia Story, and nearly 90 others, his voice is iconic. I think it will also be a pretty easy one for everyone to do. Let's break this voice down. Component number 1, the vocal cords. Jimmy's pitch is relatively neutral, although it can sometimes get higher pitched when he gets excited. Make sure to still have a good deal of compression when going higher, though. Mary! Mary! It should be noted that there is a very subtle tremor or vibrato to his voice.
Just remember, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community.
Be sure to have that shaky quality that makes his voice so endearing. Component number 2, the larynx. There really isn't too much to worry about regarding this larynx for this voice. Keep it neutral. It can rise slightly naturally, but do not purposely raise or lower the larynx. Component number 3, the tongue. The tongue is perhaps the most important part for Jimmy Stewart. This component is tied to component number 5, his articulation. Jimmy's tongue is typically curled and pulled backwards. It's similar to if you were making an sound. Imagine that all of your sounds are being made through the sound. Instead of the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices, we can say,
the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices.
You will have to navigate this position of the tongue a bit, as it can create some difficulties articulating at first. But if you can get this component down, you will have a great impression of Jimmy Stewart. Component number 4, the soft palate. Jimmy definitely has a bit of a bright shine to his voice. The tongue position helps to accomplish this in part, but we are also going to need to lower the soft palate and allow some of that nasal resonance to come through to really get that shine. We don't want a ton of nasal resonance, but a nice balanced amount.
Perfect!
Component number 5, articulation. As we mentioned, Jimmy's articulation is very much tied into his tongue position. His speech is very rhotic, meaning he very much produces his and R sounds. We want to be sure to overdo it a bit on these sounds and almost make everything sound a bit R-like. Also, there are a few other small articulation nuances to take note of. In It's a Wonderful Life, for example, he says doesn't instead of doesn't. This is in part due to his tongue being pulled back, as we mentioned. Also, his WH sounds, like in the words what or why, sound much more like HW. For example, instead of saying wait for what, he says wait for what. Be sure to throw a little bit of that H in before saying the W. Component number 6, prosody. As we mentioned in component number 1, we need to have a little bit of a tremor to his voice. If you listen closely, you're going to hear this vibrato that goes throughout his voice. Also, we want to have a good deal of pitch variation.
You'll hear his voice raise. It'll raise and then it'll lower.
Lastly, we want to make sure that we stretch out the vowels.
There's a stretch or a pull
to the way that he speaks. Let's recap.
Component number 1,
the vocal cords. We want his pitch to be neutral, occasionally becoming higher pitched when excited. Remember that his voice has that slight tremor or vibrato to it.
Component number 2,
the larynx. Nothing to worry about here. Keep it neutral, but allow it to move naturally.
Component number 3,
the tongue. Keep the tongue curled and pulled backwards, making everything sound a bit R-like.
Component number 4,
the soft palate. Lower the soft palate a bit while raising the back of the tongue to allow for some nasal resonance.
Component number 5,
articulation. Make all of his sounds with the tongue pulled back, causing them to sound R-like, and say things such as
doesn't and what.
Component number 6, prosody. We want to make sure there is a slight tremor to his voice, we want to have a variety of pitch changes, and we want to
stretch or elongate out
some of those sounds.
Thank you for watching New York Speech Coaching's Voice Breakdown, episode number 11. Be sure to check out future episodes of Voice Breakdown, the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices. From all of us here at New York Speech Coaching, we wish you and yours a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. See you next time.